Today, we are stepping into a cathedral made of bone-white oak to really break down a confession. This isn't just any story. It's about a man whose entire reality was judged not by a court or by his peers, but by the silent, thrumming pulse of a forest that simply refused to be conquered. This is the incredible psychological journey of Brother Anselm, an inquisitor facing a tribunal of the verdant absurd.
And this quote from our narrator, Brother Anselm, it just perfectly captures the heart of the conflict, doesn't it? He and his fellow inquisitors, they didn't arrive with open minds. Oh no, they came sealed inside a fortress of their own making. They truly believed their duty was their armor. But as we're about to see, it was actually a cage. So our first section here explores what the text calls the architecture of pride. And what is that? Well, it's the rigid, unbending worldview these inquisitors brought with them into this wild, untamable place. You could say it was the very blueprint of their own downfall.
I mean, just think about that metaphor for a second. A heavy stone house. Sure, it's protective, but it's also incredibly burdensome and inflexible, right? It cuts you off completely from the world outside. The Inquisitor's dogma, you see, it wasn't a tool for understanding reality. It was a wall to hide from it.
And here is where we see that central conflict laid bare. It's just so clear. On one side, you've got the Inquisitor's world. It's all abstract, artificial, built from dusty old rules and cold, hard steel. But on the other side, you have the Forest Law, something tangible, ancient, and just bursting with a vitality that couldn't care less about their scriptures. It was like they were trying to command a hurricane with a legal document. It was never going to work.
And this just reveals the sheer futility of their whole mission. They came to impose their rules on a force that was ancient and totally sovereign. The forest already had a language, a logic all its own, and it had absolutely zero interest in being converted.
Now here's the thing. The forest isn't just some passive backdrop in this story. It's an active participant. It becomes what the text calls an uncanny mirror, and it reflects everything the Inquisitors tried so desperately to bury and deny within themselves.
This is where Anselm's deconstruction, his entire world, really begins to fall apart. He starts to hear what the text calls the honest sound. And it's not just noise, it's a truth so deep, so profound, that it just completely overwhelms the dogma he's been reciting his entire life. It's this pulse that syncs up with his own hidden fears and reveals the decay, the rot in his own certainty.
And then comes the logic of zero. I love this concept. Everything that defined who Anselm was, his rank, his title, his holy mission, it means nothing here. Literally zero. The forest doesn't recognize his authority at all. It just strips him of his identity, reducing his entire institutional status to nothing.
Which, of course, brings us to the central, devastating question. The whole purpose of the Inquisitors is to judge, right? To condemn, to purify. But what happens when the very thing you're trying to judge doesn't even acknowledge that you have the right to do so? Well, their whole reality, their entire framework for meaning, it just collapses.
So this complete collapse leads Anselm to a really profound realization about his own servitude. He starts to see the fortress of his faith not as protection, but as a prison. He calls it the gilded cage.
And here it is, the moment of horrifying clarity. Anselm realizes his devotion was never really to some higher truth. No, it was to comfort. It was to preserving his social order. He chose the safety of the cage over the terrifying and noble freedom of seeing the world as it actually is.
Wow. That golden chain of his holy office, the very thing that gave him status and purpose, he realizes it was nothing more than a leash. He wasn't some master serving a divine will. He was a servant, plain and simple, to a flawed, man-made system.
So with his old faith completely shattered, what could possibly rise from the ashes? Well, this brings us to the ultimate challenge, a vision of divinity that is the absolute opposite of everything he was ever taught to believe.
The Inquisitor's Christ is passive, forgiving, weighed down by what Nietzsche would call the spirit of gravity. But the forest's God, the Ucini Christ, he's a warrior king. He is the spirit of becoming, an active force that doesn't just forgive you, it demands self-overcoming. He is, as the text says, the shadow of the overman.
You see, this new model of divinity isn't about passive belief, not at all. It's about active creation. It demands that you confront the void head-on, that you reject the easy answers of the status quo, and that you find the strength to rebuild your very soul
from the wreckage of your old certainties.
And this all leads us to the climax of Anselm's confession, his final judgment in what the text calls the Tribunal of Ash. And here, there are no judges, there are no juries. There's only the inferno of reality itself. As the forest finally consumes them, their mission, their pride, their entire architecture of pride is revealed to be, well, nothing but fuel for the fire. They weren't conquerors or judges. They were just raw material, consumed by a power far, far greater than themselves. So in this moment of total destruction, Anselm is left with one final existential choice. It's a walk on a fragile rope. He can either cling to the dead ashes of his old dogma, a mechanical, lifeless condemnation, or he can embrace the terrifying freedom of creating new meaning from absolute nothingness.
And so, the parable turns its question away from Anselm and back to us. When your certainties fail you, when your own personal fortress of belief crumbles to ash, what do you do? What will you choose to build in its place?